Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Career Jitsu podcast. We are so excited today to have an opportunity to talk to somebody from the UK. This is the first time for us to have a guest from the UK. And I'm going to start with this question. In BJJ, are you learning or are you just showing up? And in your career, are you learning or are you just showing up? Because the gentleman we have here today is not just a black belt in BJJ, but he's also a black belt in business. So he is going to give us some amazing knowledge and content for our listeners today. He is a third degree black belt and he owns a gym in Rosendale and it is called Straight Blast Gym. So those of you who are familiar with Jiu-Jitsu, you will relate to Straight Blast Gym because it has a rich history. So he will talk about that, and he will also talk about his profession. He got his master's degree, got his MBA from University of Manchester, and he did his undergraduate in economics. There's a lot of different professional things that he has done. Him and his wife have co-founded a platform. It's called Dream Agility. So he is a chief technology officer for an AI platform that manages Google Ads. So he is going to talk about that as well. So we are in for a good ride. So we can't wait. So thank you for coming onto our podcast today, Glyn.
Thank you.
Yes, Glyn, Glyn, we are so excited to have you on here. Jason and I were talking, like, this is such a neat opportunity to talk to somebody from England. Our listeners are going to tune in because they're going to love your accent, coolest accent out there. And I definitely feel like a connection because both of us economics majors undergrad, both of us MBAs, both of us focus in finance. I used to do some entrepreneurial work and you are not right now killing it with your entrepreneurial work.
Thank you.
So I am just so excited to get this rolling, and we're going to get this rolling by starting with this. Tell us a little bit about your business ascent. You started out with a really solid foundation in business, economics, and finance, which I'm sure gave you the foundation to build. And you took that and you built on it, and now you have your Straight Blast Gym and you also have your Dream Agility. Talk us through how that developed and some of the challenges you might have faced.
Yeah. So, wow, it was, so I mean, I started, didn't immediately go to university, and whatever you think you're going to do, I can almost guarantee you're probably going to end up doing something you never imagined you'd be doing. So I think that's kind of important to think about. Essentially, I went back in, I went and did a bit of work. I left school, I went and worked and was selling. I was selling insurance. Basically decided I wanted to go back and study. And so I did it part-time. So I did the job full-time, got day release, used my holiday to study and to attend classes, but I got some day release as well from the company I was with. Got my economics degree, got a first, met my wife around the time that I was finishing up the degree. And she had been basically heading up the human resources team, a company that had gone public, gone from startup to, and so she sort of said to me, "Oh, you want to be thinking about getting a professional qualification?" I got onto the AstraZeneca finance program. Did 3 years. They revolve you around 3 different kind of 1-year placements, and came to the end of that, qualified as an accountant. Knew I didn't want to stay in pharmaceuticals. It's a slow industry, to say the least. And at that point, I had a critical decision, really, where I could have gone and worked for the cooperative here, which is a big banking institution. It is a cooperative. It's owned by the workers, but it's a big banking. I remember it had I don't know if you guys have final salary schemes on your pensions. Um, but this was one of these that it had the basic salary was tremendous. And so final salary pension, I think the pension was something like 28% or so. It was some incredible amount. So basically the employer's contributing whatever you're putting in, they're putting in like an incredible amount of money into it. And it's guaranteed that when you retire, they're basically going to be paying you what you're retiring on. But I looked at the place and the place was just dead. And I was doing jiu-jitsu all along throughout this. I didn't think there was a jiu-jitsu career, which I'm now very much wrong about. And we'll come on to that. You can definitely make money in jiu-jitsu if you want to own a gym, and you can be, a multi-millionaire. I've seen so many people do it, but I certainly at that time hadn't seen anybody do it, and probably nobody had done it. But I had the choice between going to the cooperative and going to a .com, which .com was paying way less. there was no pension. And my wife said to me at the time, the thing about going and joining a .com type business is you're going to learn a lot there. You're going to be pushed. And I was pushed. And it was kind of, I think, the making of me. That was my first experience at Google Ads. And they'd said to us we couldn't improve the Google ad performance there. And, they were killing it and so on. And like, I looked at it and it was like, we could improve the Google ad performance. And I was just an accountant, but I was just looking at the numbers and saying, well, here's the costs and here's the revenues. And like, a lot of these things you're bidding on seem to be just losing money. And so I continued on with the career. I became, so I'd qualified as an accountant by then, went into a job I hated the first time a true accounting role, hated it, went and worked for another .com called We Buy Any Car. That's the guy who founded that, I'm pretty sure, is a billionaire now. That was another company another .com that I went to. And I found that going to .coms, you learn a lot from entrepreneurs. Like you learn way more from working for entrepreneurs than you do working in big companies. Like there's just you're pushed hard. You see that they don't follow the usual rules. They don't confine themselves. I could tell you of one. I won't tell you his name, but his everything he would basically say was that if somebody said to him, "You can't do this," he'd say, "What was my jail time?" And everyone would like look at him in the boardroom and be like, "What do you mean your jail time?" He'd be like, "Yeah, how much jail time am I going to get if I do this?" And they'd say, because people would just say, "You can't do this" to him. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs like this, and they're like, "Well, why can't I do it?" And they're like, "Well, you're going to get you'll get fines." And you say, "Well, how much is the fine going to be?" And they say, "The fine could be £20,000. And he just get his calculator out and he'd go, "Yeah, but like, I'm going to make at least £20,000 doing this and I might not get fined." And people gasp. And he was just like, right. So you see their mindset is just different, really. And it starts to make you realize that, how other people can think. And so I kind of went from there, went on so I've gone from like a few .coms and so on. And then I became a gaming director for what ultimately is a company owned by Rupert Murdoch. It's like kind of the equivalent of Fox in the UK. Worked there. And while I was working there, opportunity really came up. And my wife just basically took it and ran with it. And from this opportunity, we ultimately founded Dream Agility. We raised, I think we raised £750,000 back around, sometime around 2013, 2014, something like
How
that.
did you raise that? Like Kickstarter, or did you raise that with private equity, or did you?
Yeah, you just angel investment. Yeah. So there are various sort of schemes available within the UK. I'm sure similar ones exist in the US where, in certain industry sectors, companies are looking, and this actually is an interesting thing more broadly, because this is the same sort of thing in South Korea as well. But there's lots of countries that will incentivize you if you've got a good technology, particularly technology, if you've got a good technology led idea, governments will fund you, they'll support you. And there's all these accelerators that are out there as well, which is how we were able to open offices quickly around the world and roll out. So, for example, Coca-Cola has a scheme. Coca-Cola has a scheme called, I think it was called the Bridge Program, where they basically give you an office in Atlanta. We were the first UK company to get placed on that. And they give you the office, and then they have you into Coca-Cola, and they have Coca-Cola executives work with you. And so they explain that a lot of their marketing is based on there are only 7 types of films, and they talk to you about the 7 types of films. And I had one of their former executives who was coaching for them on this program said to me, "You know who you guys at Dream Agility are?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "You're Moneyball." Initially you think, "Oh, that's pretty cool." At the time I had a, much better head of hair and everything. You think, "Oh yeah, it's, Brad Pitt." And she's like, "Yeah, you're that fat guy in Moneyball. You're the fat guy in Moneyball with the stats." And I was like, "Thanks." But that was essentially what, she said, "You're in a market where, it's kind of like the old Mad Men, really, a lot of the time. People are not asking the accounting questions of marketing." This is what she was getting from me. Nowadays with digital, we can measure, even when people walk into gyms, like our company has a tracking solution that when you do a deal offline, we can still pass the deal value back into Google Ads or into Meta or, whichever advertising platform you're driving money through, and we can attribute that sale back to the clicks and marketing still doesn't really do that. Most marketing is still really kind of cost per lead. So that's kind of a I guess summary of where we've kind of gone from to sort of a little bit of where we are now in terms of Dream Agility career-wise.
So how long have you been working? When was it born? What year was Dream Agility born?
Yeah, it's around 2012. So the company's now, whatever it is, coming up 14 years we've been doing this anyway.
Wow, congratulations. That's
Yeah, thank you.
substantial.
Yeah.
And so can you just like in a nutshell, like in an elevator pitch, tell us exactly what you would do for what is a typical company that would need you and what would you do for them that they can't do themselves?
Okay. Yeah, so I suppose there's two major types of companies we typically speak to. There's e-commerce and there's lead generation. A good example in e-commerce of the sort of thing that we would do. So Chemist Warehouse is a 600 store retailer in Australia. The last time I looked, they turn over about 3 billion Australian dollars a year. So they're a big entity, and they were the first company that we put one of our AI solutions live on, because there's different types of AI. Everyone thinks AI these days, they think it's ChatGPT, and that accessibility makes everybody now an expert in it. I don't consider myself an expert, but I have been playing at it for a long, long time now. And there's all different types of AI. But the main one that we work with on e-commerce suppliers usually now is around just getting them to look at their conversion rate, and their conversion rate, almost every e-commerce company broadly converts around 3%. There'll be some that sell higher value items, like maybe on the luxury end, where actually the conversion rate can sometimes be lower as deal values tend to go up, conversion rates become more considered and can drop. Broadly, let's call it 3% on average. If the deal's done online, 3%. And what nobody at that time was really looking at all was why are you spending on the other 97% doesn't convert? Because that's essentially what you're doing. Whether you're advertising on Google, you're advertising on Meta, you're converting at 3% because your website converts at 3%. But like, why don't you start switching some of that off? And that was our fundamental question. We analyzed prior to going live with this. Chemist Warehouse were like up for it. They said, "Yeah, we'll do it." Super innovative company, even as big as they are. There's not many companies like that are like, "Yeah, hell, we'll go for it." And I really love the Aussies. The Aussies are like, they're very aggressive when it comes to this sort of thing. They'll go for things and try them out, even when they're big companies. And it's on the website, but we had around 178% increase in return on ad spend at a reduction in cost when we put the technology live. And what the technology was principally doing was switching off the 97%. So you don't switch the 97% off in one go. But we'd already looked at 600 million of spend prior to doing this, and we were like, we know that there's like we can switch 30% off in most accounts, and absolutely nothing will happen. And so that's how we got that result.
So you basically found a program that was somewhat working, but it was grossly inefficient.
Yes,
So you said, let's find the things that are working, keep them, and get rid of let's get as much of that 97% of non-conversions. Let's shut off those switches because you're paying for them.
right, 100%.
Stop paying for those and focus on what's working. You're saving the money, and the money they are spending, they're getting a better ROI.
100%. And as an accountant, this is obviously really obvious to you, and an economist, right? This is really obvious to you. But in marketing, one of the reasons this doesn't happen is because agencies who've traditionally looked after the accounts, they're paid a percentage of the spend that they manage. So it's a little bit like fund management. So
Yep.
why would you don't want to switch the spend off when you're being paid 10% of whatever the client's spending on Google, Meta, or whoever?
It's literally that compensation package is a conflict of interest.
100%. And marketers as well, going back to the accounting side of it as well, this is the argument for zero-based budgeting, is that you get this kind of corporatism goes on where the marketing department internally don't want to give their budget back because that's how they see it.
That's
They
how it
see
is
it.
everywhere in every organization, correct. Like
Yes.
if we don't use up our budget, then next year they're gonna be like, "Oh, you don't need that much anymore."
Right.
And what if we need it next year? So use it this year,
Absolutely.
right? Survival. Yeah.
And so I think it takes really entrepreneurially led companies like the Chemist Warehouse of this world, even when they grow super big, it takes that kind of mindset sometimes to actually want to go down this route. Now, don't get me wrong, we've been very successful in signing up tons of big companies that have gone down this road, and it's a great learning experience. There's an awful lot of people that just feel like this is too obvious, but what you have is the combination of the in-house marketing team and the agency. Essentially, both of them don't want to move in that direction as a general rule. And so that's the
Makes sense.
e-commerce side of it. The challenge on lead generation is that the entire industry is addicted to talking about the cost per lead and to just driving leads. Those are the only two success factors that you get in lead generation. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling, whatever it is that you're selling in the world, finance, and the deal goes offline. But the minute the deal goes offline, you have the problem of what's the quality of the lead. And agencies
Mm.
aren't interested in that because they have no technology. And so what our solution does is it passes those deal values back into Google Ads, into Meta Ads, and starts asking some pretty difficult questions of some of the decisions that could be made in its absence. Not all leads are equal. And certainly cost per lead, you'll get agencies that will say, we brought the cost per lead down. And it's like, okay, you've brought the cost per lead down, but what are the deal values that are being done from them?
Mm.
If the deal values are good, if the deal values are great, I want to be aggressive. I want to buy the entire market up if it makes sense to do so.
Yeah, it's almost like the mistake a lot of people do is they focus on the revenues of a company. Great. Revenues can be beautiful, but if you don't factor in the expenses, you could have multi-millions of dollars of revenue and still have a net loss
100%.
Mhm.
because you don't have the full story. So you're giving your clients the full story
Right.
so that they can make a value-based decision.
100%.
Yeah,
Wow,
optimizing it.
that is heavy. That is heavy. That's good. That's good stuff.
It's
So
optimization. I'm sorry, Frank. I just want to get this in there. I
yeah,
what
of
I
course.
what I really like that you talked about there is that I think there's a big difference between leadership and entrepreneurship, and I think there's a lot of leaders that don't really think out of the box enough. And I think it was great how you kind of got ahead of the curve in thinking out of the box in terms of AI, and staying ahead of that curve and staying and adapting. You were able to use your adaptability in marketing to really capitalize on this. And I am extremely interested in this, and I'm sure that our listeners are. So keep talking. So
Yeah, this is yeah. We got to just get some like free advice out here too for our listeners for more of a small business perspective for our smaller entrepreneurs out there who are using Facebook and YouTube and what just toss us out some value for these smaller entrepreneurs that are, regional and they're trying to use the internet and the social media and maybe some Google ads. What are can you name like just one or two things to be aware of and one or two things to focus more on?
I think, well, one of the things that people always seem to get concerned about when they've got a new business is particularly if they think it's anything to do with technology, is not telling anybody, right? They worry about talking too much. And I mean, maybe if you're in if it's military, it's really is that, okay. But most of the time, the idea isn't the thing, it's the processes and the systems are what make people successful. There are plenty of businesses out there that just copy somebody else because that will happen, and they just do it with better processes and systems,
mm,
right? So that's
yeah,
I think that's one of the things.
yeah, it's what's your framework,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that things like networks are your networks.
Are you talking about are you talking about hardware network or your personal network?
I think a personal network is really huge. And this is a great thing with jiu-jitsu as well, is that as you meet, like a gym is such a tremendous place to meet people and to network. Open mats are tremendous places. Competitions are tremendous places to network. But also in terms of network, we now have a phenomenon really of the internet age where things like reviews, people that we now trust the reviews of other people that we've never met. So we've never met them, but we're trusting them and we're trusting the amalgamation of their opinions as well.
Well, yes, yes, the amalgamations, because if you have 3 reviews, people don't really trust that, but if you have 17,000, and that's from have you read Cialdini's Power of Persuasion?
I'm not. I'm not.
It's a great book, and listeners out there, it's like the Bible for persuasion. He talks about social proof as one of the pillars of persuasion. When you have a certain critical mass of people saying something, people tend to believe it.
100%.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about here with the power of reviews. As long as you have that critical mass,
Yeah.
it speaks volumes and persuades people that that is a good product or service.
We've started now with gyms. We'll one of the first places that we'll start with gyms who are talking to us, and maybe they're just starting off, and it's way too early to use somebody like us for them. They might have 25, 30 members in their gym, whatever. The number one thing for me with them is to go and get as many Google 5-star Google Map reviews as you possibly can. Like you can't have enough of them. If you get, you start building them up, they'll grow with your business. You
So
know,
when you say that, like, so a small gym that has 50 people,
yeah.
that gym owner should tell all of his members, hey, if you like what's going on here, please tonight go home, write a review, hit
Yes.
the 5 stars, let other people know so that we can continue to bring in good people. Is
You
that
can
something that you would?
100%. You can get a QR code off of Google Maps. Like you set up your Google Map, there's a QR code in there, and you can basically print that out, have it in your gym, in your reception. I don't recommend leaving these things out, particularly like if you have a cancellation policy, and it depends on gym's process and so on. But sometimes if you have a review out, someone has a bad experience, the first thing they're going to, on any level, or someone injures them or whatever it might be, there's that temptation that they're going to just straight away heat at the moment. I'm going to leave them a bad review. But what I would do is I'd have it there ready. And when someone has a positive experience, they've been promoted, they're enjoying their training, they're giving you great feedback, having that QR code where they can just take a picture of it on their phone and then they've got it and they don't have to leave the review then. But once they've got that picture of it, they can go at their own convenience and it'll take you right into the Google Map review section and they can just leave you a review. So super powerful, and things like Google will use whatever the people write in there about your classes. They'll use that in order to show against certain things. So if they talk about, Jason's got a great kickboxing program. I came here for the kickboxing, but I ended up staying with the jiu-jitsu or whatever it might be. All of a sudden, for kickboxing, that's ticking both boxes. Someone does a kickboxing cert,
Right.
that's triggering. Someone says they're bringing their kids for class, kids jujitsu, kids striking, kids whatever. That's then going to that just fires back in there. I bring my 9-year-old. All of a sudden, Google knows you serve 9-year-olds martial arts. And also I think as well, just thinking about what you perceive as you think your business is about, and what your customers think it's about is often very, very different. And so I think Lloyd Irvin said this years ago to martial arts instructors. He was quoted something along the lines of saying that really, if you're in the martial arts business and you're running kids' classes, you're not actually coaching kids jujitsu, you're in the daycare market. And so he was talking about that a lot of jujitsu instructors, even back then, this was, I think, like from what I understand, like 20 years ago, I wasn't at these, but 20 odd years ago, he was basically saying, you look at what gyms charge for kids' classes, and then you look at what daycare centers charge. And he said for parents, they're getting way more value than jujitsu for their kids than at daycare. But daycare's often charging 2-3 times the rates that jujitsu is.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Right.
Wow, this is just a great little teaching for small businesses. And I'd like to just remind my listeners that this knowledge and information goes beyond the boundaries of a gym. If you own a bakery, same thing. When a customer says, oh my gosh, that birthday cake was delicious, Well, can you do me a favor? Please do me a favor. Go on Google, put a picture of the birthday cake on there, write about it. What did
Yeah,
it mean to you? That is the best way you can help me. And that could be an accounting firm, a chiropractic. It could be
absolutely.
any small business. There is your golden nugget. You need to take this and you need to run with this if you're not doing that already. And
100%.
probably a lot aren't. Probably there's a lot of businesses that just don't know to promote that with the same consistency that we show up to the gym. That's number one. Your employees should know. First thing when they hear somebody compliments your business, your employees should say, "Oh, can you do me a favor? Here's one of our cards with a code on it. Can you please just write a review?"
Right.
That'll help me, that'll help the company, and I
Listen,
will read it. And if you tell the person I will read it, they will definitely write a good one.
yeah, without question.
Great, great. I actually want to stay on this for the whole thing, but we do need to move and hear about you have a black belt, which is an incredible feat in and of itself. Can you talk a little bit about that, like how you got into jujitsu, what got you interested, what your first experience was like, and then your journey to black belt?
Yeah, so I mean, I read about the UFC in I think I was probably about 16, 17. I first read about the UFC in a magazine. And what struck me about it was, I mean, it was talking about human cockfighting, and it was quite an alarmist article, and how the UFC had been banned in all these different states. And it was all that kind of thing. But what struck me about it was that the small Brazilian guy, Royce Gracie, as I thought he was then, had basically, the smallest guy won the contest. And that was something that struck me about efficiency. I didn't really do anything too much about it. My sort of soccer career was sort of coming to a career at 17, 18, but like that was coming to an end. That'd been my main thing. And I think it was coming to an end. I hadn't really realized it was, but it kind of was. And then I kind of I'd got into strength training as well. And I started reading about Mike Mensa, and I started doing sessions with Mike Mensa on bodybuilding, like phone consultations with him. And obviously he was famous for talking about reducing the amount of time you needed to train. And it's kind of funny. I had the conversation with Matt Thornton once, the head of Straight Blast Gym. And, we've been talking, and he said, your entire life, Glenn, has been about a search for efficiency. So everything with you is always about efficiency. The Mensa, jujitsu, how you operate your businesses, you're always searching to like squeeze more out of squeeze more out of it, squeeze more out of the lemon type thing. And so, yeah, I started to just train martial arts because it was really hard to find anywhere to train. And I eventually found there's a guy called Lee Hasdall, who was, I think he was like, there's a thing over whether him or Ian Freeman were like the first professional mixed martial artists out of the UK. Ian Freeman obviously went on to fight the UFC, but Lee Hasdall was in Japan in rings, and had a contract, lived out there. They basically lived in these kind of stables, I think is how they described it, where you'd have teams basically, I think, and they'd all sort of stay together and train. I think he trained under Fujiwara on the grappling side. He's a very good kickboxer. And so I started training with him. He'd come back from Japan. I was training with him. He had a guy called Danny Batten who went on to become Cage Warriors world champion. And so I then started training with them. They were doing mixed martial arts, and then from Danny then got a Brazilian living literally on his floor to begin with. He got a Brazilian guy who just come over, was about to get his brown belt. And so I started training with him as well as Danny. And so I started doing privates with the Brazilian guy, Eduardo. And, he was a small guy, and he just used to, 2 hours we'd go at it, and he'd show me a few techniques. We do a warm up, but for the most part, looking back on it, he was using me as spar, and I just get the daylights beaten out of me. And so that was a big journey. It was 40 minutes to an hour each way to go and train with him whenever I could, and there and back. So, it all adds up, and you've got a job, and I was studying at the time as well. I was doing the economics degree. So I had a lot going on, but I really loved jiu-jitsu, and I just kind of stuck at it. And certainly in the early days, I think it was very tough. And I think it's tougher in the UK to make a living at jiu-jitsu than it is in the US. But I think a lot of that is to do with things like marketing. I think Americans do make more of an investment in their health. But yeah, I just stuck at it really. And
You
plotted.
think Americans make more investment on their health than the English?
Yeah, those who invest in their health definitely do. I think there's a
Interesting.
be I
We
think
are
there's
one of the most unhealthy countries in the list
well, it's
of
a bell curve, right? It's
yeah,
kind of
yes.
like
So you're
to
talking
me
about the
yes, it's like discussing like, you know, if you look at things like IQ of men and women, like there's this whole idea, the statistics seem to be that on average, women are a little bit more intelligent than men. But when you look at the extreme IQs on the bell curves, it tends to be that there's just, and chess, you see this with chess actually as well. At the elite level, there seems to be an awful lot of the 1% of the men, right? Versus you don't tend to get so much of that. And there will still be people that will say, well, that's because women don't get opportunities and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, bell curves are a thing and they sometimes don't work in those ways. So my take on it is that I do think that Americans, those who think about their health, really go all in on a way in which I don't think so many in the UK do. That's just my gut instinct. I don't have too much data to prove that, but that I think
right. So you just see a difference in the distribution.
yes, I think so. I
Okay,
think so.
gotcha on that. So you had a lot going on in your life, but you still stuck with jujitsu,
Yes.
even though you were very busy.
Yeah.
And then how did you grow that into your own gym? Being a member of the I just
Great
sorry, I
question.
just
Yeah.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes.
Yeah. So through a lot of it, I trained an awful lot of 6 a.m. classes with other people when I was training in Manchester at the Manchester gym. At one point, I was living about an hour north, but working south of Manchester, and the gym was city centre Manchester. So it was quite a journey. But I was kind of living down there in the week. But I do a lot of 6 a.m.s, and other professionals would. And that's another great opportunity, I think, for gyms as well, is the 6 a.m.s. But I think for anybody who's struggling to train, 6 a.m. is a great time. If you've got kids, you've got family, you've got work commitments, you've got all these things. Those are brilliant times to get in and train. Get up, get your training done, and then, you know, your evenings, you know, can be your own. But so that was one of the ways I kind of kept it. But in terms of getting to the gym, in the end, the kind of final job I had before we launched the company, you know, I had I think 50 odd people, you know, under me in the hierarchy. We had a TV channel down in London as well. This was a sport. This was basically an online casino essentially. But we had a TV channel, the poker channel, and there was there was a lot going on, and there was just no way I could keep getting into Manchester. And so my wife said, "Why don't we convert? We've got a double garage. Why don't we convert the garage and get some
Wait, I just gotta stop you. How do you say garage?
garage? You can
I
say
love it.
garage,
I love
but
it.
yeah,
Garage.
garage.
Okay, I had to
Yeah.
garage. You had a double garage. That's just so pretty. Garage. Okay, so tell us. So you were having a hard time getting to Manchester. You had a double garage, and
And yeah, so my wife helped me. She's the practical one, so she helped me put mats up in there, like we matted the walls, and it kind of went from there, really.
that's where your school came from like that, starting
Yeah,
there.
I started there, and then I got the neighbors started to complain about the parking around here because I had all these cars for all the people to class. And so they started complaining. So in the end, as I was starting to I think I started getting letters from the council and stuff like that, and sort of the thing of whether you have permission and all that thing. So I rented a unit, and then literally no sooner had I rented the unit, I've been years in the garage, but no sooner had I rented the unit than COVID basically shut the thing down.
Damn, talk
Yeah,
about timing.
yeah. It was
That had to
brilliant.
hurt. That so you
It
got a
happened to
place and then
so many
COVID
people.
hit.
Yeah.
Damn,
It actually
damn.
happened. My buddy Michael Hines, even this was an even better version. So he owns the SBG in New Braunfels, Texas, and he was a professor in Korea, like a university professor in Korea. And his wife's Korean. His kids have been educated in Korea, and he at the same time moved his entire family to New Braunfels, Texas, to open a gym as their sole source of income. And then COVID happened, and he had the same thing. And, it's an incredible story. He's got 350 members now. Like, he's blown it up. But, like, it's
Damn,
incredible what
damn.
you do in adversity, you know, and then he had to close the school but anyway, so yeah,
Yeah, so talk about like your resilience. So that happened to you, you get your own place. Now, how do you have the resilience after COVID strikes? What happened? Did you have to shut your place down? What'd you do?
yeah, so we there was some we read a lot of the rules, going back to reading the rules. And one of the things was you could keep you could keep your gym or your facility open if you were providing mental health support. So that was one of the things. I'll say no more on it than that. But we did have to close for quite some time. There was no getting away from it. But as people started to read the rules on it and like saw that like actually this is a bunch of young fit guys who train all the time and train for their mental health, you start looking at it and going, no, this is like, we're not at risk here. If I had so you look at these things, but yeah, there was a period where we had to shut, but I mean, I was fortunate in that I had my main source of income is not jiu-jitsu, but for other gym owners, it was absolutely horrific because all of a sudden you're making rental payments in some cases of 5 figures a month, and you've got your membership they're not working either, a lot of them, and they're not wanting to pay. So it wasn't as bad for me. And then an opportunity sort of came up while it was still, I kind of looked at it and thought, we've grown this so well. An opportunity came up to get a bigger space, literally just across. It was like twice the size, and I took it. So I took that, and
You
then
took it while you were struggling with it?
yeah, because I knew this wasn't going to continue. And I think one of the things about, so I think a big lesson, Frank, for people as well is, because I worked full time while I didn't do my degree, I wasn't coming out with all this debt. I came out of it like, pretty well. I'm seeing people graduate nowadays, they've got 60,000. And it's like, you're 60,000 in debt. What if you'd spent 60,000 on a business? What if you'd spent 60,000 on launching your jiu-jitsu school? They'll lend you the money. You'll find somebody who'll lend you the money on reasonable terms. If you've got the business plan, you put it together, you've got you can go and do that.
I just got to stop you right there because this is what I meant when I said we are on the same wavelength. So I'm a teacher. Obviously, I believe in education, right? I tell my kids all the time, college is not what it used to be. The debt that they're putting our children in is disgusting.
100%.
And our people are letting it happen. Our parents, their hearts are in the right place, but they don't have the information to make the right plan. And for every one of my kids, I do a spreadsheet. I show them because the government makes it easy to borrow. Any kid can borrow $120,000, and kids are coming out of schools in America literally with $120,000. Now that's fine if you're a chemical engineer, but you come out with a general business degree and $120,000, you're living with mommy and daddy.
Right.
And
For the
I
next 10
love
years.
this because my supervisor and I are hell bent on making sure our kids know this. I'm going to
That's
make sure all my kids watch this video and look at the time. It's 40 minutes in, and I'm going to have them at least watch that clip of what you said from England, successful guy, black belt, his own business. And you just said it. The lack of debt gave you freedom.
Yes, 100%.
You were free. And if you had a lot of debt, you couldn't have done all these great things that you've done.
Right. No, you absolutely can't. You can't. It buys you that ability to. I mean, I kept the book here, but I'm sure it's a favorite for you guys and see it. But so this is Charlie Munger's Poor Charlie's Almanac. So he's Warren Buffett's right hand man.
Well, I did not know that. Obviously I know Warren Buffett, but that's good to know.
Yeah,
What's
it's
the
a
name of
book
that? Tell us the name of that book again.
Yes, it's called Poor Charlie's Almanac.
Poor Charlie's Almanac.
Yeah. And it's a monster of a book. It's like, but it's all ideas. It's all basically business models, problem solving techniques, ways of framing issues and arguments. And it's a fabulous book. But it
basically a toolbox. It sounds like a toolbox.
Yeah, it is a toolbox. And it's about, that classic Buffett thing about being greedy when, others I forget what the phrase is.
Yeah, no, I
When
understand.
when
When others are cautious, you be greedy. When others are greedy, you be cautious.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Buffett's a genius.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
this is so. We could run this. There is so much to tap into here. I don't even know which direction to go.
I think we're going to have
But Jason,
to get
I've
Glyn
been
on
kind of
twice.
hogging the
for
questions,
sure.
so I'm sure you have some of your own questions.
No, I want to get Glyn on twice, maybe even 3 times, actually.
Yeah, you're coming back, whether you want to or not. You're
Thanks,
coming
I
back on
appreciate
the
it.
show, definitely.
But anyway, they kill it in business and they kill it in life. And you're an example of that because really you're able to think out of the box. Like I said before, like you had that COVID shutdown and You had to think about, okay, how do I make this work? And I think BJJ kind of helps with that. You really learn how to adapt your game, how to build your game, how to be creative. And I think that mindset that BJJ practitioners have is just great for entrepreneurship. And what you did is an example of that. Do you agree?
I think it certainly helps you with like ego management. I think that's a huge factor. I remember Matt Thornton writing about, who is the I? And I was like 23, 24, and I didn't really understand what he was talking. I had no comprehension of the ego, to be honest. You'd hear people say this person's got a big ego or whatever, and you'd say, well, what does that mean? And and you think about it, you think, oh, well, they're quite boastful, they're quite brash and full of themselves, but what you don't really get taught is that a lot of people who are successful, like, it's kind of hard to be successful without having at least a healthy ego. And so he was writing this, who is the I, who who are you? And I guess I would look at it now and think it was kind of like quite, at the time it was kind of like quite esoteric, but I started like really looking at it, and that whole thing that we go through where you're having to tap to another man, and another man that sometimes isn't even looking like he's trying. Like he could kill you, and he could eat a sandwich while he's doing it. Like,
That's a great visual, but
I'm
so
gonna have to
true.
try that. I'm gonna have to try that with you, Frank.
do you want to bet?
Jason, you might want to try tapping me out normally without the sandwich first.
That's
Okay?
true.
All right. But yes, I love that example.
But you're having to manage it, right? And where do you really get this kind of brutal feedback where everything you do is wrong? Like, I mean, life can be like that. Sometimes it can feel like that for periods of time, but you're not really then having a discussion with somebody who then says, well, this is what you're doing wrong. Have you tried doing this instead? And
Yeah,
so,
that reflection.
yeah, that reflection. So really getting an opportunity to be coached with something that has the reflexive nature of it, where I do something to you, Jason, and you choke me. And then it's like, and then you might say to me, like, I have conversations with my students all the time, like, you don't have to beat me. If you're a white belt, like, your job is not to beat me. You're not going to submit me. Like, it just isn't going to happen. Like, 25 years is too much. It doesn't matter how young, strong you are. If you're a white belt, that isn't going to happen. But like, you don't need, like, why do you need to do that? And they feel like they need to do it while they often are as well are running around the mat away from me. So they'll do something really aggressive. It doesn't instantly work. And then they run away from me. Right. And so it's like, we're losing time here. I need you to engage. You're going to lose. Just accept you're going to lose. If I want you to lose, you'll lose, but slow your breathing down. I'll slow my breathing down then because I feel more comfortable. I know you're not going to knee me in the nuts, or drop your knee on my shin, or just stuff that like beginners do. And then we can just start to play. And the minute that people start to do this, like I actually a lot of the time don't even bother trying to submit them. We'll just play a position. Even in sparring, we'll play a position, and it will just be like I'll constantly be feeding an underhook. I'm just playing an underhook the whole time with them. And I'll be like, don't give me the underhook. Don't give me the underhook. Don't give me the, and now we can work. That day that we have that free sparring session that doesn't need to be about them trying to win is the day they really start to evolve. And that's because they realize that now they're becoming like a craftsman. They're shaping their game. They're not interested in an instant result. John Frankel, who mentioned earlier, he carves things, he makes things, he makes leather bags, and he'll take months doing them. And he just enjoys the process of it not being finished and just refining and refining. And it's a metaphor for how he approaches jiu-jitsu and how I think people can optimize their learning, is that ego management is to start actually looking at it, that this isn't about them having to beat anyone. This isn't about them having to do anything. And another game they can play is I'll say to them, just try not to let me do anything to you while you move into me. So move forward and try to shut down everything I do. Just try and deny me inside space, however it is. Use your elbows, block me, make life difficult. I think that's a very different thing. I think that's a very different thing. I'm trying to do things rather than going through an experience and just gradually progress. It's like progress is not getting submitted when you're a lower belt. That's progress. Not getting submitted, staying safe, not getting injured is progress. controlling your breathing, using less energy is progress. And these are transferable skills that will help you in the workplace, you know?
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier about efficiency, right?
Right. 100%.
I just wrote that down as you said it, Jason. Look at that. Brilliant minds think alike, clearly.
Speaking of efficiency, Glenn, in our when we talked earlier, you talked about Bas Rutten, and you talked about I think her name was Belissa Granich. I
Yeah,
don't know if I'm
Bliss
saying that
Ranich.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then she's a clinical psychologist, I think you
correct.
said, and she
Yeah.
worked with Bas Rutten on breath work.
Yes.
So, can you talk more like specifically about the breath work stuff that you've really learned about and how that breath work is so important to learn in jujitsu and in business as well?
Yeah, and I think actually just for our, our own psychology as well. So yeah, it's a great question. So Belissa was a child clinical psychologist, especially in children, a child psychologist, and what she noticed, which got her into breath work, I think more deeply. I think she was doing yoga, but what really got her was just the fact that the children that were being brought to her, disproportionately were breathing in a manner that she just found kind of foreign. And, she said when they breathed, she noticed their shoulders would be going up and down and they were struggling to really get enough air to talk a lot of the time. And essentially they were in fight or flight, what we call fight or flight. And so that was what got her interested. And so I went on a kind of journey with her in terms of the breath work. I did her certification, but I was reading just the other day about Carl Jung. So, Jordan Peterson quotes him a lot. He's sort of very much a kind of a Jungian, if you like. He's that kind of lineage, although I think Jung died like late 1800s or sometime around. He was certainly he was around in the 1800s, late 1800s. And he had this thing of, I read this quote the other day that he was saying, we can talk about a problem all day and we'll go through it and we'll try and rationalize it. He said, but ultimately, the psychologist is going to come back to getting the person to take a deep breath and saying, are you okay? And if they say no, take another deep breath and another deep breath and another deep breath. And so even back then, it was like, this seems to be the solution in psychology. And so you see this situation all the time where people get themselves into fight or flight. I was talking to my wife about, we were talking about, coming on here and, assessment centers. And when kids are on graduate programs, if they're going to government roles or they're going into a big corporate, they're going to go to an assessment center. And in every assessment center you ever go to, when you do enough of these, like you start seeing them, there's always the blowhard who comes in and they're running their mouth and they're like the center of attention. And so you get given a problem to solve as a team and they're the first one that they're already in fight or flight and they're like, yeah, well, I think this is a pretty simple problem. What we've got to do, guys, is blah, 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 blah. And the technique she went through was like, my wife said this at the times, like you take a big deep breath and you let them say whatever they're going to say. You assess them just like you would on a jiu-jitsu mat, or you're in a boardroom later in your career and you watch these people go. And, a lot of the time it's like, well, we're on a 2-hour clock. It's like, well, first off, you let them all speak. And if this is going on and they're just talking and there's usually one or two people dominating the conversation, it would be like, oh, hang on a minute, guys. How long have we got for this task? I imagine I've got a watch on here. I don't have one, but how long have we got for this? Just remind me, how long have we got for this task? And someone will, we 10 minutes, it might be on one of these assessment centers, because they put you under pressure because they want to see the situation fail, right? They want to see what happens because they never give you enough time at an assessment center. And they'll do this in military. You will never get enough time that you need to solve this problem. What they're interested in is how you go about it, given you're under this tremendous pressure. And so immediately you want somebody to be the timekeeper, right? And so someone volunteers to be the timekeeper, right? So you're going to be on the time. Fantastic. You've not said anything yet. What do you think about this, right? And you're already now establishing yourself as actually the leader in this situation by just taking the big deep breath, letting them, shoot themselves off. You've already seen all their best moves by now as well and how they're thinking about the problem. Because really, if we're in an assessment center, we are in competition. And if we're in a corporate environment, we're also in a competition. That's the reality of it. You're in a competition. They're trying to get your job. They want the job that, you're both vying for the job above. That's always, these games are always going on. Unless you're the billionaire sat there pumping the money in, like, you're serving somebody.
What I hear from that is the man who breathes best wins, right?
Right. And how often do you see it in jiu-jitsu where you'll roll with some younger guy and they'll come and they'll throw everything at you, and you're just really just effectively managing the clock and trying to manage their energy. You're trying to let them come out with all their inefficiency, keep yourself safe, make sure you're not getting injured, breathe more slowly than them, and ultimately you're going to win. And when people ask Hickson, about his matches with like Saulo Ribeiro, the roles I should say, but like Saulo, there's the famous story of Saulo going and training with him. He just won the Pan Ams at black belt. And Hickson, Henry Akins tells it, Hickson had been out injured for 6 months with a torn groin muscle. And Saulo's at the gym, wants to roll with him. And Hickson's kind of honor. And, he's Hickson. He goes down there and has to roll with Saulo, and there's Saulo 25 years old in the absolute prime. There's Hickson 6 months out, 40 years old or whatever he is, torn groin muscle, hasn't rolled, hasn't trained. And you ask Saulo why Saulo lost. In Saulo's book, it says, the last time I rolled with Hickson Gracie, this is one of the submissions he caught me with. And he shows this arm bar, I think, from guard. But Hickson actually tapped Saulo to pressure. And when you ask Hickson about those types of roles, he'll say, the reason all these guys lost to me was because they didn't know how to breathe correctly. And they'll ask me about
Wow.
the arm lock. They'll ask me about the choke, he said, and I'll show them some details on what I did, but like, it's probably not that different to what they knew. But the reason I beat them was they didn't manage their heart rate. And that's because they don't know how to breathe properly.
So how would you translate that parallel there in business? Like, being able to breathe in business. Can you give an example of that?
I think even if you think about your day's work, like if you're still commuting these days, you get in the car, somebody cuts you up at the traffic lights, jumps the line, all those sorts of little things that irritate us, and we get really angry over it, or we can get really angry over it, and we're sat in our car, and like, we're not gaining anything from it, but we're kind of like offended by their driving and how they're behaving, and we allow that to impact us. And so you're sat trying to get to work sometimes in a city center, and you've been pent up for an hour in a car just trying to get into the office or get into to see a client or wherever. You can't get parked up anywhere. It's just right. Or you're on a train or a subway and you're stuck like this with people, and whole experience is horrible. They're in your space, and you're just, a lot of the time we're in fight or flight,
Mm.
like so often during our day. And then you get into work and someone says the wrong thing to you at the wrong time, or you've not even got to your desk and three people already are like, have you seen the email that's just dropped in? Blah, blah, blah. We're immediately like bracing ourselves, for like what's coming. And so again, I think that just ability to try and constantly remind ourselves to take that big belly breath and just slow everything down and just feel like, yeah, does that work? No, maybe not. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Frank,
That
has that helped you with breathing in jujitsu, like learning how to breathe in jujitsu and breathe even at work, like when you're in front of a classroom teaching kids, like if you hold your breath, like it's going to be a long day, right?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is what the Stoics always say. Marcus Aurelius always says, it's not what happens to you, it's how you interpret what happens to you. And the breathing allows you to interpret it in a way that, okay, I'm bigger than this.
Right.
This is not a big deal. And yes, this funny thing was when I started jujitsu, because I was older, I started at like 50 years old. Everybody said, you're breathing. I'm like, my breathing? What are you talking about? I just need to bench press more. I need to do more sit-ups. I need to match these people. My breathing, that is ridiculous.
It's it's the Rocky montage. We need a montage, right? And
Definitely, definitely.
by the
And when
time,
I did learn fight, it probably took me until like really blue belt until I actually, when I'm rolling with somebody, especially like the spazzy, young, athletic white belt, I definitely tell myself, wait a second. I want to be, I said exactly what you say to myself. I want to be breathing less than he is. So whatever I need to do, fight for my grips, relax, try to just keep my position. I'm not matching him. I want to be breathing less than him as much of this role as I can. And sometimes I get it and I'm happy, and sometimes I don't.
One thing I've found with it as well as I've kind of gone on the journey, and it's took me a long time to realize, is there are times to actually hold your breath. For example, if and by hold the breath, I mean like really just keep breathing in as long as you possibly can. I don't mean actually truly hold it, but like breathe in way longer than you ever would have thought you should. And so I'll do that on triangle chokes. If I'm in a triangle choke, I fill my body up with as much air as I possibly
Yes.
as I brace, which is the same as powerlifters. Powerlifters do this when they're going for like a 1 rep max. So anacondas, darcies, body triangles. I will fill my belly up with as much air as I can. I have an interesting thing on that. I did a class the other day with where I'd watched Gordon Ryan talk about escaping a body triangle and how he escapes it to the what he calls himself the wrong side, because he showed some UFC commentary, and the UFC black belt, whoever it was, the BJ black belt, was like, oh, no, he can't escape this way. And Gordon Ryan then cut to him and he's like, I escaped that way every single time. And so I went through this detail, and there were some brilliant details of it. And then one of the blue belts said to me, we did an isolation round of it. So we introduced a technique, we had a go at it. And one of the blue belts then said to me, he said, you didn't mention breathing on this. He said, I just filled my belly up. He said, and to be honest, I didn't really need to do much. I did one thing that Gordon said, and that just broke the body triangle. And I was like, wow. So I got
Well, I love that advice. And we've got a guy, Vlad. Just listen to that name, Vlad, at our gym, and he gets you in a body triangle and you just want to die. He's got long legs. He's a Russian guy. And he has this wicked left. When he gets you in that body triangle. I do not tell Vlad about this, Jason. I'm going to try that next time he gets me. He's a black belt. He's just a savage guy. And I'm going to fill my belly up. But let's see. I will let you know. I will get back in touch with you and let you know. I probably won't survive, but maybe if I survive longer, I'll let you know.
That's the key thing, right? So like I was saying this about like Henry Akins. I was training in Costa Rica at the Hero Academy. It's a brilliant cause. And they basically look after hundreds of local kids there. It's pretty poor country, Costa Rica, and they provide jiu-jitsu and uniforms, and they get all these top instructors come in. Beautiful. It's in Tamarindo, Costa Rica, beautiful place. And we'd done a couple of hours training, and Henry got me in his Soul Stealer, which he has, if you're someone familiar with his instructional material, and he's got a very successful online business, doing these instructionals on like Hickson's approach to jiu-jitsu from like his 12 years training with Hickson. And he puts people in these Soul Stealers. It's basically a modified scarf hold. And he puts these videos out of like how long can these black belts survive in his Soul Stealer. And if you're in the room, you'll literally watch him just roll with multiple degree black belts and just tap all of them to scarf hold. And they're tapping like he gets that it's like it's like I say, it's like the Bret Hart sharpshooter. The minute it's on, they're like, it's over. Everyone's like, oh, it's gone, right? They're looking for the referee's decision. The guy's tapping, right? The pressure's horrible. Henry's, not a small guy either. And he knows how to place his weight. It's just horrific.
Wait, what's his full name? I got to look this up.
Henry Akins.
Yeah.
He's like, a really well-known instructor. Like,
yes.
Particularly for older grapplers, I think. He coached Kron a lot.
I think Hickson's first black belt, right?
He was, I think he was Hickson. I think the claim is he was Hickson's fastest American to black belt, something like that. I think he was maybe his third American black belt, or some. I know there was Dave Karma. I think was Hickson's. I think was Hickson's first black belt. But like, there's always controversy over who, But Henry was definitely one of the early ones.
But getting back to that breathing, Glyn, you mentioned the scarf hold position, right? So getting into that Kesa position and being able to know how to breathe when you're in the top on that position. Just that exhale and distributing your weight correctly, like through them. I remember feeling this. I had a judo instructor who was he's all Japan national champion. And he was like probably 130 pounds, like soaking wet 130 pounds. And I remember when I was like a blue belt, he got me in a Keisagatame position and like just relaxed and breathed out, and like every single breath of air was just squeezed out of me. I could not move. And then I was like, he felt, it was like a 130-pound person that felt like he was about 300 pounds.
Yeah, it's
So I
crazy
know
what
what you
these
mean.
guys can do. And he got me in that. Like, we'd been training a couple of hours. It's boiling hot. You know, I don't want to give my there is a caveat at the end of this, so I'm not giving myself, you know, too much of a, you know, pat on the back. He put me in that Soul Stealer, and because of the like, I would have tapped immediately prior to learning to train. You know, I've been a black belt a while. Even then, you know, I think I was like maybe second degree at least. I think second degree, and he put me in that, and I would have tapped prior to doing the breath work without doubt. And he was
So your technique was to breathe like in. Is that what you did, or did you hold it?
in that I would go with it. In the scarf hold's kind of unique. I go with it. So if they squeeze, I exhale. They'll usually relax at some point a little bit, and then you feel. So you've got to, it's kind of, you've got to breathe with their movement, really. That's what I've kind of figured with it. And there are some techniques to it. Like, if you spend time in this, I've recently realized that the biggest thing I think in this position is to get your shoulders to the mat, just like you would escape in a rear naked choke. And that does sound ridiculously simple, but that's like the best escape I've found. And I've spent so much time in it because I find it such a great position to teach people to breathe properly, because what you do is you tap everyone in the room to it. Then you teach them to breathe properly. And I've got like now purple belts that are like, I just can't tap with that anymore. Their breathing's that good that I can't tap them. But as a second degree, you know, up to, you know, well, certainly as a black belt for years, you know, first degree black belt, I didn't breathe properly at all. And so I've got purple belts now that are way better than in that position, like are almost invincible in terms of the breathing, at least from what I can do to them, where before they would have tapped instantly. And I've tapped black belts, I've tapped guys at the, you know, the highest levels in that position in terms of at least black belt, or they've been UFC fighters and so on. If you get them in that position, you can tap them to pressure. But once you teach them to breathe properly, that position changes completely. And Henry's been good enough to go on I went on a podcast and talked about this, and then someone had Henry as the next guest, and who'd been in the Soul Stealer, and said, "Is what Glyn said true? Did he survive your Soul Stealer?" And Henry said, "Yes, it is." What Henry didn't tell him was that literally once he abandoned the Soul Stealer, he arm locked me about 5 seconds later. But mounted me and arm locked me. But he then just tapped me out. But the point was, I survived that, and I survived I wasn't going to tap to the pressure of the breathing. I had to tap to him, you know, mounting me, and then he was going to break my arm basically. So I had to obviously tap to the arm lock. But like, being able to control your breathing is a way more transferable skill than being able to escape an armbar. That's the thing. That's what this really, I think, starts to teach you, is that you have way more control than you think.
It's like your foundation of your house, you know, that fundamental breathing is so essential to everything else. We always think about technique and skill and learning flashy techniques, but sometimes we forget about that fundamental, and breathing being that fundamental foundation is extremely important, you know. And jujitsu, like we're talking about right now in jujitsu, and I want to get back a little bit talking about that, your business in Dream Agility, because that being an AI platform, that is almost like the breathing in jujitsu. That AI platform is like your breathing of your
Right.
business, right?
100%. That foundation of actually being able to look at your data, depending on which type of business model you are. You've either got great data, but you've got a lot of inefficiency in it, or you don't really have real quality data at all if you're in lead generation. For the most part, your data is so limited.
Absolutely. Frank, you got anything, buddy?
I've got like
It's a lot, right?
literally 8 pages of notes.
I know, right?
There is no way for me to provide a summary. Man, we've been talking for an hour and 12 minutes, and it just flew, and I really don't want it to end. I am going to have to be concise as possible to give our listener. I think it's actually, Jason, do you think it's that time?
What time is it, Frank?
It's your favorite time of the program, tap out time, where upon your tap out, from this session, we are going to give you, wrap up nice and neatly, some of the golden nuggets from our podcast. And have to tell you, Glyn, man, this is like, you'd be such a cool guy to just have a brew with at
Thank
a
you.
pub and just chat about philosophy, jujitsu, business, and life. Man, this has been such a pleasure to talk to you. So easy,
Appreciate it.
such an
Thank you.
easy interview to do. All right. So without further ado, you said something that I'm going to shout out to all my students and all students everywhere. And Jason, you have plenty of students because you're a teacher. And it is this: what you think you're going to do is usually not what you end up doing. Young people there, Quinn is a living example of a guy who flowed like the water. He went to his schooling, he had some ideas about maybe corporate America, and then he went his own path. He followed the opportunities. He was flexible. He was open to ideas. So, to the younger people, to our younger listeners, don't put so much pressure on yourself when you're getting off on your career. Find a direction. Have fun rowing in that direction. Maybe you'll stay that way. Maybe you'll twist and turn a little bit east and west, but it's the journey that counts. So enjoy that journey. The second thing you said that was very interesting is you juxtapose the two worlds of stability in the big corporate environment, and risk in the smaller more volatile environment. And while there's no right or wrong answer, I do appreciate that you said your heart wasn't really in the big boat. Your heart was more in the canoe that could tip over,
All right.
but that was more agile.
100%.
You took the risk, and through that risk, you learned a lot, and ultimately you end up building your own business. So the way that our listeners frame risk, we hope that you can be inspired by this and understand that risk is a good thing if you're following your passion.
Right. 100%.
Right? I have to just mention, and I'm going to use this in my own head, your buddy who had the quote when people said, you really can't do that. You can't really do that. All right. So just tell me what the jail time is so I can make a decision. I love that philosophy. Tell me what's my jail time, and then we'll talk about whether I want. That is just talk about a way to frame risk. You're not being ignorant. You're not being ignorant. Tell me what the jail time is, and then we'll make a decision. So I think that's one of the most, well, I don't know. My students are probably a little young for that one, but I really do love that. You you gave us some really good tips. Everybody out there who owns a small business, we just got a mini seminar on free information that is very valuable. And I'm just going to summarize it right here. Your idea is not the source of your wealth. It's the process and system that you develop around it.
Right.
If you don't believe our speaker here, if you don't believe Glyn, look at the car industry. Ford came up with all the best ideas, but after that, when it comes to sedans, Honda Accord,
Right.
you can't beat, and Camry. They took our ideas and they made better processes. The Japanese taught us that.
The Kaizen.
Yes, excellent. Exactly that. Perfect. And that's also a good restaurant around here too. That's good sushi. And you talked about the power of networking and your personal network, and how jujitsu and open mat and going to competitions gives you that social network to not only build yourself up, but build your business up. Dead on. We know in our gym, like everybody in our gym is so cerebral and successful because it's a thinking man's sport, right? I love, and this is applicable to all small businesses. At all of your people, both your employees and your happy customers, to go on Google, hit the 5 stars, and talk about an experience. Have your barcode, your QR code ready for them. Anytime you get a compliment from now on, it's like, hey, your compliment made me happy. Can you please share it? Bam. That's worth the whole price of this entry into our podcast right there. And an overarching theme that you talked about is efficiency. And you should definitely listen to Andrew Valancourt's podcast. It's on efficiency. He's an engineer, talks about efficiency all the time. When to use your energy, when to not use your energy. You would appreciate that, Glyn. So please look that up. And how important efficiency is, especially when you're getting a little bit older. Technique and being effective is better than just being a savage. right? Gosh, and I'm sorry that I'm rambling on, but I'm
No
not going to
worries.
leave any of this stuff out. It's so good. One of my favorite moments of this entire podcast was when you said that your lack of debt gave you the freedom to do the amazing things you're doing. And I want every young person, before they spend $70,000 a year on a college, and I'm not saying it's always a bad decision, sometimes it makes sense. Please understand that lack of debt is freedom, period. Freedom to do your own business, to be your own boss, freedom to work somewhere else. And if your boss is mean to you, you can say at that moment, you either treat me with respect right now or I'm out that door. Your choice. That's what the lack of debt gives you. And I love that. My students are going to definitely listen to that. And finally, to wrap it up, the whole mindset in business and jujitsu of ego management, the healthy ego versus the unhealthy ego. BJJ can be brutal and a little bit violent sometimes, but it teaches you, damn, I have a lot to learn. But it also gives you the confidence. And Sam Snow, our last guest, said he likes the balance of confidence and humility that he gained from jujitsu. You, Glenn, also said the same thing, just in different words. And that is something that will help you on the mats. And that is something that will help you in business. And finally, I don't know, another one of my favorites. I keep saying my favorite, but I loved this too. And I completely agree with you. You said if you want to grow in business or if you want to grow on the mats, stop worrying about instant winning results and start playing. Be open, have fun, relax,
Right.
enjoy, and consider growth your win. You don't need to leave with a medal. Did you grow? And if you did, you won.
Right.
I just want to toss out a book called Quiet for our Glenn. You said something very interesting. You said when you're put in that assessment competitive environment, how the extrovert starts out. Here's what we're going to do. Their legs wide apart. First, let's look at the and yes, the world needs extroverts, and
Right.
that's not a bad thing, right? But this book on quiet echoes some of the sentiments that you just talked about, that introverts who think first, look around, listen, and then come out and speak, many, many times have the greatest value. And there's a book called Quiet for introverts out there that you should read because it talks about that being an underrated skill. And I like that you brought that up because there's a lot of people that are not extroverts
Right.
and they're not going to grab the reins right away. And there is value in that too. And finally, I'm going to look up the Soul Stealer. So when I get out of Vlad's figure four using my breathing, then I'm going to reverse it, get him in the Soul Stealer and tap out a black belt. That's what's going to happen. Amen and
That's
hallelujah. That was one long review.
that's
Tap out,
that's the
right?
that's the call to action for you, Frank. Learn how to use that, right?
Yeah. I just hope Vlad is not watching this because he's going to destroy me if he is.
And laugh with his
Yeah.
Russian laugh.
Frank, no. He's so nice too. He's like, Frank, no, you are a beast. You are a beast, Frank. He's a kind monster.
Yeah,
Definitely.
the call to action for our listeners too is like get this out there. Glenn's this podcast needs to get out there. So, and Glenn, if you have any information that you can share with our listeners about Dream Agility, we would love to put any information in the description. So if you're listening to this podcast, please check out the description. Glenn will have some information in there about Dream Agility, what he does for work. And if you were listening to this podcast, you will see how valuable his work is.
And let me just, if I could just cut him for 1 second, Glenn, who is like, what size business can use what you have to offer? What's your sweet spot? What's your target market?
We have everything. When we started off, it was literally typically massive companies spending an awful lot of money, and we still got plenty of them. So it's everything from companies who are spending hundreds of thousands a week on Google ads through to now just increasingly an awful lot of jiu-jitsu gyms, fitness gyms, relatively small lead generation businesses. So we span the whole sphere
You
really.
have the whole gamut.
Yeah.
So like a small business in Dudley, Massachusetts, if they were interested in learning how you can help them market and become bigger, better, more efficient, that would make sense for them to connect with you.
Yeah, we have a case studies page on dreamagility.com. So there's case studies in there. It does start with some of the bigger companies we work with, like Galeries Lafayette, who are the kind of like Parisian Bloomingdale's. If you ever go to
Wow.
Paris, Galerie Lafayette is a place to go without doubt. Take your wife there, or maybe don't, because it's pretty luxurious. You want a big credit
I
card if you do, but
Yeah, I'd probably end up going to Target
right.
myself.
But yeah, so it's everything. So some of the but there's also case studies on there of gyms that we've worked with and smaller businesses, and it's literally everything from engineering companies, you name it. We've got power generator companies down in Australia that we work with. So we're global. Most of our clients are in the US, but we are all over the shop, as we say in the UK. We're always interested, and the other thing I find as well, and I've been I've actually signed up with, we haven't mentioned Keith Ferrazzi, I think it's how you pronounce it, but
Yes, Never Eat
Greg
Alone.
always talks
Great
about
book.
Keith Ferrazzi.
I always talk about his
this is
book.
what Jason
Nobody does
said.
it alone.
Yeah.
Nobody does it alone.
So this is it. So I've joined his Beyond Connections, and it's just a great reminder. This is his online programming for network. It's been phenomenal already. The number of people that I've not even started his formal course, and I must have like connected to 100+ people on LinkedIn and had multiple WebEx conversations with people. We're now it's almost like you can turbocharge what he's talked about, because we can jump on a Zoom, right? Like we're doing.
Right.
So
Right.
I've networked like crazy. Course hasn't even begun yet. And
Good
so
for you. So you're taking his course.
yeah, I'm taking his course, and it's been absolutely fascinating, because one of his main things is like, it doesn't really cost any of us, half an hour on a call. If somebody, like, I don't mind if somebody's too small for us right now, or it doesn't really matter. If I can help them along the journey, I know that at some point, like, I've had so many conversations where I've helped somebody, even 5 minutes, given them some tips, and they've referred somebody else onto me, and it's been worth a fortune. you know
Right.
Literally, just that referral, just that 5 minutes of giving someone your undivided attention and time to help them, and maybe think about like the things of Google Maps, like getting your Facebook recommendations, getting people who are serving you, getting people who've worked with you in the past. My wife got a friend of hers a job where she just helped her with her LinkedIn, and it was quite incredible, the leap that this individual made in terms of her career, by literally my wife just spending a bit of time on her LinkedIn profile, and then somebody she used to work with went, "My God, I didn't realize you had all this experience." She basically got effectively headhunted by somebody who she used to work with, who didn't realize she had anywhere near the experience she had. And that was just my wife just spending time getting her, talking to her about what should be on her LinkedIn profile, teasing out of her things that she'd done that she'd never even thought were relevant. And so I'm a big fan of, if you've got anybody in Dudley, Massachusetts that wants to have a quick Zoom call, whatever their business is, I'm always interested in, business. I always learn from people as well. So it's always a two-way. I discovered, I don't know if you guys play paddle, but one of the things that's come out of Beyond Connections is how fast this paddle market is growing in the UK. It's kind of like tennis to me. I don't really.
Well, I think that's probably pickleball.
Pickleball?
I
Pickleball,
bet you it's
right.
pickleball.
It's
Yes.
exploding, absolutely
Yeah, yeah, it's
exploding
getting
over
big
here.
here too. It's getting
So I've
very
learnt
big
I've
here
learnt a
too.
ton just from having a chat with a guy here who's kind of leading in that area, and you learn about an entirely new market, how people are spending their time. I didn't know this was such a thing, and then I'm on Instagram this morning. I'm seeing guys who train at one of our other gyms down the road, and when they're not doing jiu-jitsu, they're playing paddle or pickleball, as guys call it.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how you see this thing suddenly. You're like, oh wow, that's what they're doing, and you're aware of it, and feel like you grow through this is, another aspect of the social network. You grow through growing your social network, and having conversations with people and learning about them, and helping them, and so on.
And that's what our podcast does, right? That's a piece of that whole process.
100%.
Community-driven growth.
Yes, yes, and givers gain. Don't forget that. Givers
Absolutely.
gain always. We're given a lot, and we'd like to say thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Glyn, for
Thank you. Thank you for the
this
opportunity.
fascinating conversation. It was so much fun.
Thank
It
you.
just flew like that, went like that. And you're going to stay in touch with us, I hope.
Yeah, 100%. No,
And you
thank
have
you.
friends here in the United States. So make sure you use your connection,
Yeah,
right? Come visit us.
I need to get back on.
And you could write off the whole trip because you have business here. Write off the trip. Let's go into Boston and have some fun. To our
Awesome.
listeners, please do us a favor. If you know anybody who has a business, who's trying to grow it, send them over to the link, Glyn's link, which is included in this podcast. Send them over. Have them look at some of their case studies and their advice. Also, please share this with every single person you know. Put it on your Facebook, share it with people you think will get use out of it, and help us continue to grow. Look at us. We're in England. That's where we are now because of our listeners, right? They propped us up, and here we are. So we love you, our listeners. Thank you both for a great, great conversation.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy your weekend.
And you. Enjoy it. Yeah. Thank you,
I
guys.
certainly
you.
will.
Awesome.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Have a good day, guys.
All right. Peace out. Peace out.